The sound came first, a sharp crack that cut through a ballroom full of polite conversation and fake laughter. Then the silence. 50 people stopped mid-breath like someone had hit pause on the room. My head turned slightly to the right from the impact. I didn't stumble, I didn't step back. I just felt it, the heat spreading across my left cheek, precise and immediate like a warning flare. I kept my posture straight. My name is Riley Sullivan, Major United States Army, Logistics and Cyber Intelligence, 32 years old, trained to process chaos before reacting to it. And right in front of me, wearing a designer dress she couldn't afford without fraud, was my younger sister, Paige. Her hand was still half raised. Her face wasn't shocked. It wasn't even embarrassed. It was angry. Not the kind of anger that comes from being hurt, the kind that comes from losing control in front of an audience. Around us, our extended family sat frozen. Aunts, uncles, cousins, 50 people who had spent years watching me quietly exist in the background while Paige performed her life like it was a reality show. No one spoke. No one moved. They were waiting for me to do something dramatic. Cry, yell, hit back. I didn't do any of that. I looked at her hand first, read across the palm, then I looked at her face. Then I lowered my gaze to the white tablecloth between us, where a pen and a document sat like a setup that had gone off script. Then I reached into the inner pocket of my uniform, not fast, not slow, just controlled. Have you ever been pushed in front of a room full of people, family no less, and expected to stay quiet just to keep someone else's lie intact? And if you didn't, you'd be the one labeled the problem. Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting yourself, subscribe. Because this story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when you finally stop playing your assigned role. 6 months earlier, I was stationed overseas running routine clearance maintenance. In my line of work, you don't wait for problems to show up. You look for them before they have a chance to become problems. Every 6 months, I run a full background audit on myself. Financials, credit activity, digital footprint, everything that could compromise my clearance or make me a target. It's not optional, it's protocol. I logged into the system at 02:17 local time. Standard review. Expected duration under an hour. At 2:29, I found the anomaly. A commercial bridge loan. $450,000. My name listed as the primary guarantor. The asset tied to the loan, Sullivan Family Agricultural Trust. That got my full attention. The farmland wasn't just property, it was generational. Passed down from my grandfather. Legally structured in a shared trust between me, my parents Arthur, and Helen and Paige. Any financial action tied to that trust required documented consent from all primary parties. I hadn't signed anything. I pulled the full loan file. Originating bank regional commercial lender out of Massachusetts. Loan purpose short-term capital for real estate development staging operations. Borrower Paige Sullivan, LLC. Guarantor Riley Sullivan. That last line was clean. Too clean, no hesitation marks, no irregular spacing, no obvious signs of tampering. Which meant whoever did this didn't fake it, they replicated it. I didn't call home, I didn't send a text, I kept digging. First step, access logs. Every digital signature tied to a commercial loan carries metadata, timestamp, IP address, device, signature. It's not visible on the surface, but it's there. The signature timestamp was 11:42 a.m. Eastern Time, 3 months prior. The IP address traced back to a residential network in Boston, my parents' house. I leaned back in my chair and ran it again. Same result. Then I checked the notary. The document had been notarized by a licensed attorney in Suffolk County. Name matched a local lawyer my father used to mention during golf weekends. I remembered the name because he once joked the guy could make paperwork disappear if you asked nicely. I pulled the notary record. Legitimate registration. Which meant either the notary was compromised or willingly involved. I moved to financial tracing. The $450,000 wasn't sitting in an escrow account for any actual development project. It had already been distributed, split across multiple outgoing wires. I flagged 3 primary categories: luxury vehicle leases, high-end brands, monthly payments inconsistent with any sustainable business revenue, country club membership fees, initiation and annual dues, and a series of smaller transfers, frequent irregular routed through accounts linked to my father. I cross-referenced those with known patterns. Gambling debt coverage, not speculation, pattern match. I sat there for a full minute without moving. Then I opened Paige's business filings. Luxury real estate developer. That's what she called herself online. Her social media was full of staged photos, open houses, champagne flutes, staged kitchens with perfect lighting. In reality, she ran a small property staging operation. No large-scale development licenses, no major contracts on record, which meant the loan wasn't funding growth, it was covering collapse. And they didn't just need money. They needed a clean name attached to it. Mine. I pulled the signature file again and zoomed in. Every curve, every angle, it matched my official records. Not a sloppy fake. A precise replication. That requires access to multiple verified documents. Military paperwork, legal forms, anything with a consistent signature pattern, which meant this wasn't Paige acting alone. I already knew that before I confirmed it. But I confirmed it anyway. The device ID used during the signing session matched a desktop registered under my father's home office network. Arthur Sullivan didn't just know about this, he facilitated it. And my mother, Helen, who handled every piece of family paperwork like it was a sacred ritual, would have been the one organizing it. They didn't make a mistake. They made a decision. I closed the financial logs and opened one last file. Audit schedule from the lending bank. Routine compliance review scheduled for the following week. That meant the paperwork would be re-verified. Signatures checked. Identity confirmed. They weren't just committing fraud, they were about to fail a federal compliance check. And when that happened, the liability would fall on the guarantor. Me. I didn't feel anger. That's not how I process risk. I felt clarity, clean, sharp, immediate. They had taken a shared asset, forged my identity, leveraged it for personal gain, and assumed I would either not notice or choose silence to preserve the illusion of family unity. They counted on the version of me they raised. Quiet, compliant, useful. They forgot what I actually became. I didn't call my mother to scream. I didn't cry in my barracks. I simply closed my laptop, looked at the timestamp on the forged digital signature, and realized my family hadn't just stolen our history. They had handed me the exact weapon I needed to end their illusion. I stayed seated in that barracks office for exactly 4 minutes after I closed the laptop. Not because I was frozen, because I was building the first layer of the response in my head. Calling my mother would have been useless. Helen Sullivan could turn a kitchen fire into my fault if she needed to. Calling my father would have been worse. Arthur heard questions as disrespect and facts as personal attacks. Calling Paige would have given her time to panic, delete, deny, and post a filtered picture about protecting your peace from a car she leased with stolen money. So I did what I was trained to do. I documented. At 2:41, I created a secure evidence folder. At 2:43, I began exporting the loan records. At 2:51, I captured the digital signature metadata. By 3:10, I had the IP logs device, ID lender file number notary registration, and the bridge loan terms copied into a structured timeline. The loan was short-term commercial debt, high interest, fast maturity, the kind of loan people use when they either expect a major deal to close soon or they are running out of oxygen and calling it strategy. Paige had called it expansion. The bank called it a bridge loan. I called it a fire with paperwork. The principal amount was $450,000. The stated purpose was development staging and acquisition preparation. That sounded impressive until I traced the outgoing wires. The first major disbursement went to a luxury vehicle leasing company. Paige had 2 leases under her business, a white Range Rover and a black Mercedes GLE. Neither vehicle was necessary for staging homes unless the furniture had suddenly become impressed by German engineering. The next wire covered country club dues, initiation fees, monthly charges, dining minimums, guest fees, a long list of expenses that had nothing to do with real estate and everything to do with making broke people look rich in front of richer people. Then came the smaller transfers. Those were more interesting. They moved through Paige's LLC, then into an account connected to my father. Not huge amounts at once, $7,000 here, $12,000 there, then $25,000 in one clean transfer marked consulting repayment. My father had never consulted anyone in his life unless yelling at a waiter counted. I pulled historical records and found old liens, cash advances, and private debt activity tied to Arthur. Nothing criminal by itself, just ugly, quiet, hidden, gambling debts leave patterns. Not always obvious, but consistent. Cash withdrawals near casino locations, credit card advances, payments to private lending entities with names so generic They might as well be called bad decision holdings. The more I traced, the clearer it became. Paige needed money to maintain the image. Arthur needed money to hide the consequences. Helen needed the family to keep looking perfect. And I was the clean file they used to hold the whole thing together. By sunrise, I had a working dossier. Not emotional notes, not accusations, evidence, names, dates, account numbers, transaction paths, IP data, notary details, loan terms, trust restrictions, digital signature records. A timeline so clean even my most annoying training instructor would have nodded once and pretended not to be impressed. I requested brief leave 2 days later. Official reason, family anniversary event. Unofficial reason, walk directly into the fraud environment and collect what digital records couldn't provide. My parents were throwing their 40th anniversary banquet in Boston. 50 relatives invited, private ballroom, string quartet, open bar, 3-course dinner. The kind of event families use when they want everyone to admire the version of themselves that only exists in group photos. Paige was supposedly hosting it. That was the story. She had told everyone she wanted to give back to mom and dad for all their support. That was funny in the same way a bank robber buying flowers for the teller is funny. I flew home the day before the banquet. My mother cried at the airport for 12 seconds. I counted. Then she pulled back, looked at my uniform bag, and said, "You packed something appropriate, right?" Paige worked very hard on this event. There it was, I had been in the country for less than 3 minutes, and I was already background staff at the house. Paige was in the kitchen wearing cream-colored silk and complaining into her phone about floral arrangements. My father stood beside her, practically glowing. "There she is," he said when I walked in. "Our soldier, not our daughter, our soldier." Useful title, convenient distance. Paige looked me over and smiled. "Riley, thank God. Can you help carry the guest gift boxes from the garage? I'm drowning over here." She was holding a latte. Drowning seemed unlikely. I said, "Sure." That one word made all 3 of them relax. People like my family mistake calm for weakness because they only understand volume. If you aren't yelling, they think they're winning. So I carried the boxes. Then I picked up dry cleaning. Then I drove my mother to the florist because Paige couldn't risk being seen looking stressed. Apparently, stress was fine for me. It matched my boots. At dinner, they praised Paige for 20 minutes. Her vision, her ambition, her generosity, her business instincts. Arthur said, "Your sister has always known how to create opportunity." I nearly laughed into my water. She had created opportunity, all right, mostly by forging my name on a federal banking document. Helen touched Paige's hand and said, "Some people are just naturally good with people." That meant Paige could smile while lying. Then my mother turns to me and said, "Riley, honey, you don't mind helping set up tomorrow morning, do you? You're so organized." Translation: You are not interesting enough to celebrate, but you are useful near folding chairs. I smiled. "I don't mind." At 11:30 that night, the house finally went quiet. Paige went upstairs after 2 glasses of wine and a dramatic speech about how exhausting leadership was. My parents closed their bedroom door at midnight. I waited. At 1:47, I got out of bed. No shoes, no lights. I knew the floorboards in that house. I had learned them as a kid, sneaking downstairs to finish homework after Paige threw tantrums loud enough to turn algebra into combat training. My father's office was at the back of the first floor. Dark wood desk, old law books he never read. Framed golf photos. A safe behind a low cabinet under tax folders from previous years. Arthur thought hiding things under boring paperwork made him clever. It made him predictable. The safe had a keypad. I didn't need to crack it. I had watched him enter the same code since I was 16 Paige's birthday. Of course. At 2:03, the safe opened. Inside were passports, cash envelopes, trust documents, and one thick folder labeled Sullivan Land Holdings. I photographed the folder before touching it. Then the inside. Then each page in order. There it was. The physical copy of the bridge loan. My forged signature. Paige's LLC documents. Trust authorization pages. And the notary stamp. I zoomed in with my phone camera. The name matched the attorney from the digital record. Michael Donnelly, Arthur's golf buddy. The man who used to come over for Memorial Day barbecues, drink my father's bourbon, and tell Paige she was too pretty to worry about numbers. Apparently, he worried about numbers just enough to notarize fraud. I photographed the stamp, commission number, date, and seal impression. Then I photographed the signature pages from 3 angles, including the indentation marks where someone had pressed too hard copying my name. That part mattered. Digital fraud is useful. Physical fraud is better. It gives prosecutors something to hold. I returned every page exactly as I found it. Same order, same folder angle, same safe contents. At 2:26, I closed the safe. At 2:31, I was back in bed. My mother knocked on my door at 7:15 and asked if I could pick up Paige's dress from alterations because Paige needed a calm morning. I said yes. Of course I did. They looked at my silence and saw the same compliant, invisible daughter they had conditioned me to be. They had no idea that to an intelligence officer, silence isn't surrender, it's just data collection. I carried Paige's dress into the house at 8:12 that morning and hung it on the back of the laundry room door like I was still playing my assigned position. No questions, no attitude, no visible pulse. The banquet was scheduled for 7 o'clock that evening. My mother had already turned the kitchen into a command center for unnecessary panic. Seating charts covered the marble island. Floral invoices sat beside champagne receipts. Paige's phone buzzed every 30 seconds with messages from vendors, friends, and whatever poor assistant she had convinced to work for exposure. My father stood by the coffee machine in pressed slacks and a blue shirt, looking like a man preparing to receive compliments he did not earn. Perfect. All three of them were in the kitchen. That saved time. I walked to the marble island and set down a plain manila envelope. Paige glanced at it. "What's that A document?" My mother sighed without even looking up. "Riley, if this is about some military form, can it wait? Today is not the day." "No," I said. "Today is exactly the day." That got my father's attention. I opened the envelope and placed a photocopy of the forged signature page on the island. I turned it so all three of them could read it. No one moved for 3 seconds. Not long. Just enough. Paige recovered first. "What is this supposed to be my signature?" I said. "On a $450,000 commercial bridge loan I never authorized." My mother's face tightened. My father put his coffee down. Paige rolled her eyes, which was bold for someone standing next to felony evidence before breakfast. "Oh my God, Riley," she said. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" I looked at her. "Yes." Helen picked up the paper and scanned it too quickly to be innocent. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You fly home after months away and the first thing you do is attack your sister." There it was, not concern, not confusion, immediate repositioning. I had not accused them of murder. I had placed a loan document on a kitchen island. But in my family, facts were only welcome if they made Paige look good. I said the loan names me as primary guarantor. The digital signature came from this house. The notarization was completed by Michael Donnelly. I never signed it. My father's jaw shifted. That was his tell. He did it when he was deciding whether to deny, intimidate, or change the subject. He chose intimidation. "Lower your voice," he said. "My voice is already low. Don't get smart with me. I'm not being smart. I'm being accurate." Paige gave a short laugh. "You always do this. You come in acting like everyone is beneath you because you wear a uniform." I looked down at the photocopy, then back at her. "You used my credit profile to secure a commercial loan against trust property." "My God," she snapped. "It's family property. It is trust property. Same thing." "No, it is not." That annoyed her more than the accusation. People who live on entitlement hate definitions. Definitions create walls. They prefer words like family support and sacrifice because those can be stretched until they cover theft. Helen set the paper down and pressed her fingers to her forehead. "Riley, you're being dramatic." I almost smiled. A forged signature, a $500,000 loan, a compromised military clearance. And I was dramatic. That was Helen's gift. She could stand in a burning room, point at the smoke alarm, and call it negative. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm giving you one opportunity to explain why my name is on this document." Paige crossed her arms. "You were overseas. We couldn't reach you. You emailed me about linen colors for the banquet. That's different. It really isn't." My father stepped forward. "Your sister had a time-sensitive opportunity," he said. "The bank needed a guarantor with stable credentials. You had the cleanest file. It made sense. It made sense to forge my signature." His eyes hardened. "Watch your tone." I turned fully toward him. "Did you authorize it?" He didn't answer. That was an answer. Helen jumped in quickly. "Your father was trying to help the family. Paige is building something real. You have no idea how hard it is to start a business." "I manage supply chains across hostile regions," I said. "I have some idea," Paige scoffed. "There it is, St. Riley and her government paycheck." "My paycheck is legal." Her face flushed. "Good. Not because I enjoyed it, because pressure reveals structure. Paige leaned over the island and tapped the photocopy with one manicured nail. Your credit was just sitting there doing nothing. You don't have a husband. You don't have kids. You don't even live here. You were letting your financial profile rot while I was trying to build something. I stared at her. That was the cleanest summary of narcissism I had ever heard. My identity was unused inventory. My stability was waste. My consent was an inconvenience. Family is supposed to share resources, she added. Sharing requires permission. Oh, please, you would have said no. Yes, exactly. She said it like that proved her point. My mother nodded because apparently logic had packed up and left the Sullivan household years ago. You've always been so rigid, Helen said. So cold. Paige dreams big. You punish people for needing help. No, I said. I punish fraud when my name is attached to it. Arthur's voice dropped. Enough. The room shifted. He walked to the end of the island and opened the leather folder beside him. I recognized it immediately, not from the safe, from the bank file. He pulled out a document and slid it toward me. Validation waiver. I didn't touch it. Arthur said the bank is doing a compliance review next week. Routine. Nothing dramatic unless you make it dramatic. I read the top line from where I stood. Borrower certification and guarantor validation. So that was why they had been calm. They didn't need me not to notice forever. They just needed me to help clean it up before the audit. Arthur pushed a pen across the island. You're going to sign this. No, you haven't heard the rest. I heard enough. His face went red, but his voice stayed controlled. That was the dangerous version of Arthur. The dinner table dictator. The man who believed volume was optional because everyone had already been trained to obey him. You have 2 days, he said. Sign the waiver, confirm the loan, and get out of our way. Paige smiled into her coffee. Helen looked at me with wet eyes that arrived on command. Please don't destroy this family, she whispered. I looked at the three of them. Not one apology, not one admission of harm, only fear that I might stop absorbing the consequences. Arthur leaned closer. And if you refuse, he said, you are dead to this family. I said nothing. He continued. We will contact your command. We will tell them you've been unstable, paranoid, emotionally erratic. We will say you threatened us. We will make sure your career feels this. Helen didn't stop him. Paige didn't flinch. That told me more than the documents did. The fraud was financial. The abuse was procedural. They had a plan for my money, my name, my silence, and now my reputation. My father tapped the waiver. Sign it. I picked up the pen. Paige's smile widened. Then I placed the pen neatly beside the document without signing. No. Arthur stared at me like he had not heard the word in years. I took the photocopy, folded it once, and slid it back into my envelope. The banquet starts at 7, I said. You should get dressed. Then I walked out of the kitchen. Behind me, Paige laughed once sharp and confident, like the game was already hers. My sister smirked, sipping her coffee, entirely convinced that the threat of losing my family would force me into submission. She forgot that a soldier never walks into a hostage negotiation without already securing the perimeter. I stepped out of that kitchen without raising my voice, because raised voices are for people who still think they need permission to be believed. My father called my name once. I kept walking. My mother said, Riley, don't be cruel. That was rich. The woman had just watched her husband threaten to destroy my military career after helping forge my signature on a $450,000 loan. And somehow I was the cruel one because I declined to participate in my own financial execution. Paige laughed behind me. It was small, confident, spoiled, the kind of laugh people use when they think the game is already rigged in their favor. I picked up my keys from the entry table, walked out the front door, and got into my rental car. I did not slam the door. I did not peel out of the driveway. I drove like a person with insurance and no interest in giving anyone a dramatic detail to repeat later. Downtown Boston was already awake. Traffic moved in short, irritated bursts. Construction workers shouted over machinery. People in suits crossed intersections like they were personally offended by red lights. I parked in a garage near Post Office Square at 10:06 a.m. At 10:12, I walked into the office of Miriam Vale. Miriam was a federal financial crimes litigator with the facial expression of a woman who had once smiled in 2009 and decided it was inefficient. I had retained her 3 weeks earlier after confirming the loan metadata, the wire transfers, and the physical notarized documents. She was not a family attorney. That mattered. Family attorneys talk about mediation. Miriam talked about jurisdiction, criminal exposure, asset freezes, and whether defendants were smart enough to panic quietly. I liked her immediately. She looked up when I entered her conference room. Did they ask you to validate it? Yes. Did you sign no? Did they threaten you? Yes. Career destruction, mental instability allegations, family exile. She nodded and wrote 3 words on a yellow legal pad. Predictable, useful. Recorded Massachusetts is a 2-party consent state. I did not record audio. Good. You're disciplined. Most people get cute and ruin admissibility. I handed her the folder. She opened it and reviewed the new photos from my father's safe. The physical loan copy, the notary stamp, the signature pages, the commission number, the trust documents. She did not gasp. She did not say, "Oh my God." Professionals do not perform shock for paperwork. She just said, "This is enough to move." At 10:31, we began the lockdown protocol. That was Miriam's term, not mine, though I respected the branding. Clean, direct, slightly dramatic, but within acceptable range for a civilian. First, we filed an official identity theft affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission, not a complaint written in emotional language. A structured affidavit listing the fraudulent loan, unauthorized use of my identity, forged guarantor signature, and misuse of trust property. Then came the FBI report. Because the loan involved a federally insured commercial bank, digital signatures, interstate financial systems, and wire transfers, this was no longer a family misunderstanding. That phrase dies very quickly when federal banking infrastructure gets involved. We attached the metadata: IP logs, timestamp records, device identifiers, wire disbursement trail, trust restrictions, notary information, photographs of the physical documents. Miriam's paralegal built the filing packet with the calm speed of someone who could ruin a person's week before lunch. At 11:48, Miriam contacted the bank's fraud division directly, not customer service, not a branch manager, fraud division. She gave them the file number, my identity verification, the affidavit numbers, and the evidence summary. Then she said the words that changed the entire direction of the day. My client is the named guarantor and states under penalty of perjury that her signature was forged. There was silence on the line, then movement. You can hear institutions change posture, not emotionally, operationally. The bank representative requested a secure upload link. Miriam sent the packet. 10 minutes later, we were on a call with their senior fraud investigator and compliance counsel. The investigator's voice was flat. Major Sullivan, did you authorize Page Sullivan LLC to use your identity as guarantor? Num. Did you sign the bridge loan documents? Num. Did you appear before the notary listed on the documents? Num. Were you in Massachusetts on the signing date number? I was overseas on active duty. Miriam slid a copy of my travel orders across the table, already included, already indexed. The investigator paused. That creates a material identity conflict. Miriam said, it creates a verified fraud event. I liked Miriam more every minute. By 12:40, the bank had initiated an internal fraud escalation. By 1:15, they confirmed a silent review of all accounts tied to Page Sullivan LLC, Arthur Sullivan, and related payment channels used in the loan disbursement. Silent was the important word. No warning calls, no courtesy email. No friendly heads up from some local banker who played golf with my father and thought felony fraud was just paperwork wearing a bad suit. The freeze would not happen immediately. It was scheduled. 8 p.m., prime time, during the banquet. Miriam asked me twice if I understood the consequences. Yes. Your sister's business accounts may be frozen. Yes. Your father's personal accounts connected to the transfers may be frozen. Yes. Payments scheduled for tonight may decline. I'm aware. If the bank balance is unpaid or pending, that card may fail. I looked at her. Miriam, that is not a bug. That is the feature. For the first time, she almost smiled. Almost. By 2:30, the FBI affidavit was filed. The FTC identity theft report was locked. The bank's fraud division had the evidence. Compliance counsel had acknowledged exposure. Miriam had also prepared a cease and desist notice in case my family attempted to contact my command. She was very thorough. My kind of civilian. Before I left, she slid a slim folder toward me. Do not argue tonight, she said. Do not explain too much. Do not threaten. Let them create their own record in front of witnesses. I know. If they try to force you to sign anything, refuse clearly. I will. If they touch you, do not respond physically. I held her gaze. I'm Army Miriam, not stupid. People become stupid around family. That was fair. I drove back to my parents' house at 3:18 p.m. When I walked in, Chaos had become decorative. Garment bags hung from doorways. Makeup artists moved through the living room. Helen was near the staircase holding earrings and speaking in that tight, sweet voice she used when she wanted servants but only had relatives. "There you are," she said. "Can you help your father with the seating cards?" "No." She blinked. It was a small word, but apparently in that house it qualified as weather. "No," she repeated. "I need to get ready." Paige appeared at the top of the stairs in a robe, hair half pinned, face already contoured into someone wealthier. "Finally," she said. "Can you zip my dress later? The stylist has to leave early." "No." She stared at me like I had slapped her with a dictionary. I went upstairs. My dress uniform was hanging in the guest room closet. Immaculate, dark fabric, clean lines, pressed to regulation, every element placed with purpose, not decoration, not costume, record. I showered, tied my hair back, and dressed slowly. At 5:26, I pinned on my medals. Not many people understand military awards. They see medal and ribbon. They don't see the mornings, the discipline, the deployments, the reports written at 0300. The decisions made when exhaustion starts negotiating with judgment. Each one had been earned, not gifted, not financed through a forged loan, not staged for social media. Earned. Downstairs, Paige was stepping into her gown, champagne satin, custom tailoring, a neckline low enough to distract from financial insolvency. The dress probably cost more than my first car, and unlike my first car, it had been purchased with stolen money. She turned in front of the mirror while my mother clasped her hands. "You look stunning," Helen whispered. Arthur stood behind them, proud and swollen with delusion. "Our girl," he said. I watched from the hallway for 2 seconds. That was all I needed. Paige caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled. "Try not to look so severe tonight, Riley. It's a party. I'll do my best." "Good. And remember, we can still fix this if you stop being difficult." There it was again. Fix this. In their language, that meant helping them bury the crime and thanking them for the shovel. At 6:14, we left for the venue. 2 cars. Paige rode with our parents because naturally the star of the show needed an entrance. I drove alone behind them, which gave me 12 quiet minutes to check my messages. Miriam Feld. Confirmed. Freeze scheduled for 2000 Eastern. Stand by. I replied with one word. Acknowledged. The ballroom was already glowing when we arrived. White tablecloths, gold chargers, tall floral centerpieces. A string quartet near the far wall. Waiters moving with trays of champagne. 50 relatives turning their heads as Paige swept in like the patron saint of borrowed money. Aunt Linda hugged her. Cousin Mark complimented her dress. Uncle Robert told Arthur he must be proud to have raised such a successful daughter. I stood 3 feet away in uniform, while everyone admired the woman whose lifestyle was currently under review by federal fraud investigators. Comedy is everywhere if you respect timing. Paige floated from guest to guest, laughing too loudly, touching arms, receiving praise, like tribute. My mother watched her with wet-eyed pride. My father shook hands like he had personally invented family values. I checked my watch. 7:41 p.m., 19 minutes. Paige waved me over for a family photo. She placed herself in the center, of course. Arthur and Helen beside her. I stood at the edge. The photographer said, "Everyone smile." I did. Not much. Just enough to be polite. At 7:58, my phone vibrated once inside my uniform pocket. No need to check. I knew. As we walked into this grand ballroom, listening to the string quartet, and watching my sister greet our aunts and uncles like a wealthy socialite, I checked my watch. The federal freeze wasn't just coming, it was already in the room. At 8 p.m., Paige was laughing beside the champagne tower, like federal banking systems did not exist. That was the thing about people who build their lives on appearances. They trust lighting more than facts. They trust applause more than paperwork. They trust the room because the room has always protected them. The banquet was fully underway. 50 relatives filled the ballroom. Round tables, white linen, gold-trimmed plates. Too many centerpieces blocking everyone's view because Paige believed elegance meant making conversation physically difficult. Waiters moved between tables with salads no one cared about. The string quartet played something expensive and forgettable near the far wall. My parents sat at this head table glowing. Helen wore a pale blue dress and the soft, misty expression of a woman who believed public admiration counted as morality. Arthur sat beside her, one hand on his wine glass, nodding every time someone praised the family. He had the same face he wore at charity auctions when donating other people's money. Paige was in her element. She moved table to table with a practiced smile, accepting compliments on the venue, the flowers, the menu, her dress, her generosity. Every time someone said, "You really outdid yourself," she touched her chest like humility had stopped by for a quick visit. I sat at a table with 3 cousins and 1 uncle who had already asked me if I was still doing army stuff. Yes, I had said. That ended the conversation, which was fine. Small talk has always felt like unpaid labor. At 8:07, my phone vibrated once. I did not take it out. One vibration meant confirmation. The freeze had been executed, somewhere beneath the ballroom music and clinking glasses. Paige's accounts had stopped being useful. Arthur's linked accounts had likely done the same. The payment rails were locked. The cards were dead. The illusion was still standing, but the foundation had already been removed. No one in the room knew yet. That was the cleanest part. The visible collapse always comes after the legal one. At 8:19, the dessert course was delayed. I noticed because the catering captain spoke quietly to a manager near. The service doors and the manager looked toward Arthur twice, not panicked yet, concerned. The kind of concerned people get when a card declines but the client is wearing a nice suit. So they assume it must be a machine error. Paige didn't notice. She was preparing for her speech. Of course there was a speech. Paige believed microphones were proof of destiny. At 8:26, she rose from her seat at the head table and tapped a champagne glass with a knife. The room quieted. The quartet stopped. Every face turned toward her. She picked up the microphone with both hands and smiled at our parents. Mom, Dad, 40 years. Applause started too early because relatives are easily triggered by round numbers. Paige waited until it died down. I wanted tonight to be perfect. She continued, her voice already trembling in that polished way she used when she wanted people to think she was overwhelmed by love instead of attention. Because you both gave me everything. That part was accurate. Not in the way she meant, but still. You taught me to dream big, she said. You taught me to believe I could build something of my own. I took a sip of water. No wine. I wanted a clear head. Also, I refused to drink bad banquet Chardonnay unless ordered by a superior officer, Paige continued. When I started my real estate development company, people doubted me. They thought I was just some young woman with big ideas. She paused. I looked at the centerpiece. Paige had never developed real estate. She staged homes, occasionally, when clients paid. Mostly she photographed other people's kitchens and called it branding. But Mom and Dad believed in me, she said. And because of that, I've been blessed with success beyond what I imagined. Arthur smiled proudly. Helen wiped under one eye. I watched from my table while 50 relatives absorbed a bedtime story for adults with poor financial literacy. That's why Paige said I wanted to host this night myself. No shortcuts, no compromises, just love. Because family supports family, there it was, the phrase, family supports family. In our house, that sentence had always meant Riley gives, Paige receives, and everyone pretends it is a beautiful tradition. The room applauded. Loudly, people stood, glasses raised. My parents kissed. Paige placed one hand over her heart and gave the crowd a tearful smile. The performance was good. Not honest, but good. Then the applause began to fade. Paige looked directly at me. That was her mistake. She should have sat down and enjoyed the last 10 minutes of being admired before reality found the door. But narcissism hates loose ends. It needs submission, especially from the one person who refuses to clap hard enough. She walked away from the head table, still holding the microphone at her side. Arthur noticed. So did Helen. Neither stopped her. Paige crossed the ballroom, slowly smiling at relatives as she passed. Several people turned to watch. She reached my table, leaned close, and placed a folded document directly onto my dinner plate. The validation waiver. Then she dropped a pen beside it. The pen landed against the china with a small, sharp click. My cousins stared. Uncle Robert looked confused, which was his usual setting. Paige bent toward me and spoke loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. Sign it, Riley. I looked at the document, then at the pen, then at her. She smiled wider, champagne confidence, golden child entitlement, a woman lighting a match inside a gas station because she liked the sound. Stop being a jealous loser, she said, and support the family. The nearby tables went quiet. Not the whole room yet, just enough. I stood slowly. My chair moved back against the carpet without a sound. Paige's smile twitched. She expected refusal, maybe irritation, maybe a whispered argument she could later turn into a story about. How I ruined the mood because I was bitter about her success. She did not expect projection. My voice carried farther than hers because I didn't rush. I will not sign a validation for a $500,000 federal wire fraud. Paige. The silence spread through the ballroom in a clean wave. One table stopped talking, then another, then another. By the time the last word left my mouth, the entire room had gone still. Paige's face changed, not much at first. Her mouth stayed open in the shape of a smile, but her eyes hardened. Her cheeks flushed. The microphone hung uselessly in her hand, still live enough that a faint breath moved through the speakers. Helen stood at the head table. Arthur's chair scraped backward. Aunt Linda whispered, "What did she say?" "Good question, Linda." Finally, someone was listening. Paige laughed once. It sounded broken. "Are you insane? No. You're really doing this here. You handed me the document here." Her hand tightened around the microphone. "You are so jealous," she said. "You've always been jealous. Because I actually built something and you just follow orders for a living." I also read documents before signing them. A few relatives shifted in their seats. That line landed harder than I expected. Americans enjoy sarcasm more when there are appetizers involved. Paige stepped closer. "You don't know what you're talking about. I know the loan number, I know the bank, I know the IP address, I know the notary. I know my forged signature originated from Dad's home office." Arthur reached us then. "Riley," he said under his breath, "sit down." "No." Helen arrived beside him, pale and furious. "Please stop," she hissed. "You're embarrassing us." That was the first honest thing she had said all day. Not "you're wrong," not "this isn't true," just "you're embarrassing us." Paige looked around at the room, 50 faces, all watching. The perfect banquet was no longer about her generosity. It was about the word fraud hanging in the air like an unpaid invoice. She leaned toward me and whispered, but the microphone still picked up enough of it. "You stupid little soldier, I said that microphone is on." A cousin gasped. Paige looked down, then up. For 1 second I saw the calculation fail. She had no clean exit, no joke, no tears ready fast enough, no mother stepping in with a rescue line, no father able to dominate the room before the word federal had done its job. So she did what undisciplined people do when control slips. She escalated physically. Her right arm came up fast. I saw it before it landed. Training is useful that way. You notice shoulders before hands. Weight shift before impact. Intent before contact. I could have stopped her. I didn't. Her palm struck my left cheek with a crack sharp enough to cut through the ballroom. My head turned slightly. The microphone squealed as she dropped it. No one breathed. The sting spread across my skin, hot and immediate. My cheek pulsed once, then twice. Paige stood in front of me, chest rising, hand still raised, shocked at herself, and somehow still angry at me for making her do it. Arthur moved first, not toward me, toward the document. Helen grabbed my wrist. "Don't say another word," she whispered. I looked at her hand on my sleeve, then at my father, who was already trying to fold the waiver like hiding paper could hide a crime, then at Paige. She was trembling now, not with fear, with exposed rage. The perfect daughter, the successful developer, the generous hostess. All of it cracked wide open by one sentence and one slap. 50 people stopped breathing, waiting for the disciplined army officer to strike back or break down in tears. But I didn't raise my fist. I just looked at the red mark on my sister's hand, smiled a very cold smile, and reached into my uniform pocket. My fingers closed around my phone without hesitation. Not fast, not dramatic, just precise. Helen's hand was still gripping my sleeve like she could physically hold the situation together. Arthur had the document halfway folded like paper management could undo federal fraud. Paige stood in front of me, breathing hard, her control already slipping in front of 50 witnesses she had invited to admire her. I pulled my arm free. Then I unlocked my phone. No shaking, no second thoughts. I tapped one contact, Miriam Vale. She picked up on the first ring. "Go ahead," she said. No greeting, no wasted syllables. I pressed speaker and held the phone up at chest level angled, so the nearest tables could hear clearly. I didn't need to raise my voice. Silence does most of the amplification when people know something is about to break. "Execute the freeze," I said. The room didn't react immediately. That sentence didn't sound dramatic to civilians. It sounded procedural, small, almost boring. That's the advantage. On the other end, there was a slight shift paper, maybe. Then another voice joined the line. "Male, controlled, neutral tone, Major Sullivan," he said. This is Daniel Harris, Senior Fraud Investigator for the lending institution. I didn't respond. I let him continue. We have completed verification of the submitted identity theft, affidavit digital signature discrepancies, and associated financial transfers. Effective immediately, all corporate accounts tied to Paige Sullivan, LLC, and all linked personal accounts associated with Arthur Sullivan have been placed under Federal Fraud Review. There it was, no emotion, just status. A few people at nearby tables leaned closer. The investigator continued. All outgoing transactions have been halted. Existing balances are restricted. Access is suspended pending further investigation into confirmed indicators of identity theft and financial misrepresentation. Paige laughed. Too loud, too fast. That's ridiculous, she said, waving her hand like she could dismiss a federal process the way she dismissed invoices. This is a joke. Riley, what did you do? Call some random guy and put him on speaker? I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the phone. Please confirm, I said. The investigator didn't miss a beat. Confirmed. Accounts are frozen as of 2000 Eastern Time. This includes all payment instruments issued under those accounts. Arthur's phone rang, not a polite vibration. A sharp, continuous ring that cut through the silence. He didn't answer it immediately. He looked at me first. That was the moment it landed for him. Not fully, not intellectually, but instinctively, the way a person recognizes a fall before they hit the ground. His phone kept ringing. He answered. Hello, pause. No, that's not possible. Longer pause. I authorized that payment. Another pause. I don't care what your system says, run it again. His voice rose on the last sentence. That was new. Arthur didn't repeat himself to service staff. He expected compliance the first time. Behind him near the service entrance, I saw movement. 2 catering staff members approached the head table, walking faster than professionals usually allow themselves to move in formal settings. One of them spoke quietly to a floor manager. The manager's expression changed. Then they all looked at Arthur. Paige was still talking. Riley. This isn't funny, she said. You think you can embarrass me like this, and I'm just going to? Her fiancé's phone started buzzing, violently. Not one notification. Multiple. Back to back. He pulled it out, frowned, then looked at her. Paige, he said, his voice lower now. My account just got flagged. She blinked. What's something about linked financial exposure? What does that mean? It means nothing, she snapped. It's a glitch. He looked back at his phone. It says Federal Review. That phrase hit differently. Even the relatives who didn't understand finance understood the word federal. Arthur lowered his phone slowly. They declined the card, he said more to himself than anyone else. The catering manager stepped forward. Sir, he said carefully. We're having an issue processing the remaining balance for the event. Arthur straightened. There is no issue. The card on file has been declined for suspected fraud. That word again. Fraud. It moved through the room like a second wave. Helen's hand flew to her mouth. No, she whispered. Paige stepped back from the table. This is insane, she said. This is actually insane. Riley fixed this. I looked at her. No, you caused this. No, you did. Her fiancé took a step away from her. Not far. Just enough to create space. That's not what you told me, he said quietly. Paige turned to him. What are you talking about? You said your financing was secured, that everything was clean. It is clean. He held up his phone. It doesn't look clean. She reached for his arm. He pulled it back. Small movement, clear message. Arthur tried to recover. This is a temporary error, he said loudly, addressing the room now. A banking glitch. These things happen all the time. The investigator's voice was still on my phone. Major Sullivan, we recommend you do not engage further with involved parties. Legal notices will be issued within the hour. Understood, I said. I ended the call. Silence again. Different this time. Heavier. Real. Helen started breathing too fast. Short, shallow breaths. Arthur, she said. Fix it. I'm trying, he snapped. You said this was handled. It was handled. Then why are they saying fraud? Paige stepped toward me again. Her voice broke this time. Not controlled, not polished. Tell them it's a mistake, she said. Tell them you signed it. Just tell them, no, you owe me. I almost laughed. That word again, owe. You forged my signature, I said. You leveraged trust property, you misused funds. You involved a notary. This is not a mistake, it's a case. Her eyes filled with tears. Not sadness, panic. You're destroying everything, she said. No, I said. I'm documenting it. Her fiancé looked at her one last time. Really looked. Not at the dress, not at the performance, at the situation, at the risk. At the word federal sitting on top of everything she had built. He set his glass down on the table. No speech, no argument. He just turned and walked toward the exit. "Wait," Paige said. He didn't stop. "Wait." He kept walking. The doors opened. He left. The room watched him go. That was the moment the illusion broke. Not when the accounts froze. Not when the card declined. When the person closest to her decided this was not survivable. Helen started crying. Loud, uncontrolled. "This is our anniversary," she sobbed. "You ruined it. Over nothing. Over a misunderstanding." I looked at her. Nothing. That was the word she chose. Not forgery. Not fraud. Not identity theft. Nothing. My mother sobbed, screaming that I had ruined our parents' anniversary over a petty misunderstanding. But the real disruption wasn't my phone call. It was the heavy, undeniable sound of the ballroom doors being pushed open by men in dark, tactical windbreakers. The ballroom doors opened with a steady push, not a dramatic crash. That made it worse. 2 federal agents entered first, followed by 2 local police officers. The agents wore dark, tactical windbreakers, with federal lettering across the chest. No weapons drawn, no shouting, no movie nonsense. Just calm authority walking across polished floors while a string quartet sat frozen with bows still in their hands. White-collar enforcement does not need to run. It knows exactly where it is going. Every head turned. Paige stopped crying mid-breath. Arthur stood straighter because his first instinct was still to perform control. Even with frozen accounts, a declined banquet card, and half the room staring at him like he had just set the family tree on fire. My father believed posture could negotiate with law enforcement. The agents approached the head table. One of them was a woman in her 40s, with short brown hair and a voice that did not leave room for debate. The other was a taller man carrying a folder. Behind them, the 2 officers positioned themselves near the aisle. The female agent looked at Arthur first. "Arthur Sullivan," he lifted his chin. "Yes." "And who exactly are you?" She showed identification. "Special Agent Karen Willis. We need you to come with us for questioning regarding commercial bank fraud, identity theft, and misrepresentation involving a federally insured financial institution." Aunt Linda made a sound, somewhere between a gasp and a hiccup. Arthur looked around the room, then back at the agent. "This is absurd," he said. "You can't just walk into a private family event." The agent did not blink. "Sir, you are being detained for questioning. I'm not going anywhere." The local officer stepped half a pace forward. Arthur saw it. So did everyone else. His face darkened. He switched into the voice I had heard my entire childhood, the one that made waiters apologize for things they did not do, the one that made my mother go quiet, the one Paige learned to imitate when someone told her no. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he said. The agent's expression stayed flat. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The room went silent in a way I had never heard before. Not shock, not discomfort, recognition. For years, Arthur Sullivan had been the man everyone deferred to at family gatherings. He carved the turkey, chose the wine, corrected people's opinions like he owned the patent on being right. Now, a federal agent was telling him to turn around in front of 50 relatives and the catering staff. He looked at Helen. She was crying too hard to help him. He looked at Paige. She was already backing away. That was Paige's survival instinct. When the spotlight turned ugly, she stepped out of it and let someone else burn. But this time, the light followed her. The male agent turned toward her. "Paige Sullivan." She shook her head once, like denying her name might be a viable legal strategy. "No, I mean yes, but this is a misunderstanding. Ma'am, we need you to come with us as well." "For what commercial loan?" "Fraud, cross-state identity theft, and suspected grand larceny tied to unauthorized use of personal identifying information." Paige's mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was new. The woman who could talk for 20 minutes about backsplash tile had run out of words at the exact moment words finally mattered. Arthur snapped, "Do not speak to her without an attorney." The agent glanced at him. "That is correct. She has the right to counsel." That answer seemed to offend him more than any argument could have. The officer guided Arthur's hands behind his back. Metal clicked. Once, clean, final. The sound traveled through the ballroom. Helen screamed. Not a word, just noise. Paige turned toward me. "Riley," she said. I stayed where I was. She took one step closer. Tell them this is a joke." I looked at her designer gown. Champagne satin, custom fit. Purchased with money routed through accounts now sitting under federal review. The hem brushed the floor while 2 officers waited beside her. For a second, she looked very young. Not innocent, just young. There is a difference. You told me I had 2 days to get out of your way, I said. I didn't need 2 days. Her face collapsed. The agent instructed her to turn around. No, Paige said. No, wait, please, Mom, do something. Helen reached for her, but the local officer gently blocked her path. Ma'am, step back. This is my daughter, Helen sobbed. The officer said, step back. Helen looked at me then. The hatred in her eyes was clean. No confusion anymore. No performance. Just pure blame. You did this, she whispered. No, I said. I stopped signing for it. That line reached farther than I intended. I saw Uncle Robert look down at the validation waiver still on the table. I saw Cousin Mark glance from the document to Paige. Aunt Linda put one hand over her mouth and stared at my parents like she was seeing them without good lighting for the first time. The shift was quiet but obvious. For years, I had been the difficult one. Too disciplined, too cold, too absent, too rigid. Paige had been the bright one, the social one, the beautiful success story everyone loved to mention at weddings and holidays. Now she was being handcuffed in a gown while federal agents listed charges built on my stolen identity. That kind of fact changes a room. Fast. Arthur tried one last time. This family will sue every one of you, he barked. The female agent said, you can discuss that with counsel. Then he was escorted toward the doors. No one clapped. No one spoke. A few relatives stood just to get out of the way. Arthur passed me and stopped for half a second. His face was red. His eyes were wet, but not from sadness. Rage had nowhere left to go. You are dead to me, he said. I looked at him. You already used my name like I was. The officer moved him forward. Paige came next. She was crying now, mascara starting to run under one eye. Her wrists were behind her back. Her shoulders were hunched. The golden child finally carrying something she could not outsource. Riley, she said again, softer this time. Please? I did not answer. Not because I had nothing to say. Because silence was the only thing she had earned. As the agents led them through the ballroom doors, the guests turned to watch, not with the old judgment they used to aim at me. This was different. This was the uncomfortable look people get when they realize they applauded the wrong person for years. Helen sank into a chair. The catering manager stood near the head table, still holding the declined payment slip like the world's most awkward receipt. The validation waiver remained on my plate. A pen beside it. The whole thing looked pathetic now. Small, cheap. After everything, their big plan had come down to a forged signature, a family party, and the belief that I would rather betray myself than embarrass them. Outside, red and blue lights flashed across the ballroom windows. Inside, nobody knew what to do with their hands. Watching the flashing red and blue lights reflect off the ballroom windows, I didn't feel a rush of vindictive joy. What I felt was the incredibly heavy, clean silence of a lifelong illusion finally breaking apart. 6 months later, I reviewed my credit report at 6:10 on a Tuesday morning. No anomalies, no unauthorized accounts, no open liabilities tied to Paige Sullivan, LLC, or Arthur Sullivan. The $450,000 bridge loan had been formally classified as fraud. My name had been cleared as guarantor. The bank's internal investigation confirmed identity theft, forged authorization, and misuse of trust collateral. That's what resolution looks like in my world. Not closure, documentation. Paige was awaiting federal sentencing. Her legal team had negotiated delayed reframed standard process. It didn't change the facts. The charges were not abstract. They were supported by digital records, physical documents, and financial trails that didn't need interpretation. Her fiancé canceled the wedding 2 weeks after the banquet. No public statement, no explanation, just a returned ring and a clean exit. That was probably the smartest decision he made in the entire relationship. Arthur and Helen filed for bankruptcy within 90 days. The bank moved quickly. Commercial lenders don't wait for family reconciliation when collateral is involved. The estate was foreclosed to recover losses tied to the fraudulent loan. The house I grew up in was sold to cover part of the damage. I drove past it once, not for nostalgia, for confirmation. The lawn was trimmed. New car in the driveway. Different people inside. Assets transfer cleanly when paperwork is done correctly. Emotion doesn't slow that process. The farmland was different. That was the one thing I did not allow to become collateral damage. Working with the bank's fraud division and a separate trust attorney, I restructured the Sullivan Family Agricultural Trust into a protected entity with restricted access controls. Ownership rights were legally clarified. Authorization protocols were tightened. No single party could leverage it again without verified multi-factor consent and independent legal review. That's what protection looks like. Not trust, structure. Helen sent me a letter 3 months after the foreclosure, handwritten, 3 pages. I read the first paragraph. She said she missed me. She said everything had gotten out of hand. She said Paige had made mistakes, but she was still my sister. She said family should come together in difficult times. Then she asked for a small loan, not a large one, just enough to help them secure an apartment. That was the part I expected. Manipulation rarely ends with accountability. It just adjusts the tone. I folded the letter once. Then I put it through a shredder, no response, no call, no explanation. Silence again used correctly. People misunderstand silence. They think it means weakness. It doesn't. It means the conversation is over. 6 months gave me distance, not from the facts, from the noise. So I'm going to say this clearly because someone listening to this needs to hear it without decoration. There is a pattern in families like mine. It has roles. The golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the one who performs success, the one who absorbs consequences, the one who maintains the illusion. Paige was the golden child. She could do no wrong as long as she looked like she was winning. I was the scapegoat. Useful when needed, ignored when not. Blamed when something broke. Arthur enforced it. Helen protected it. That dynamic doesn't happen by accident. It is built, over years, small decisions, who gets praised, who gets corrected, who gets protected, who gets sacrificed. If you are the scapegoat, you are trained to believe that your value comes from what you tolerate. You are told that keeping the peace is maturity, that saying no is selfish, that protecting yourself is betrayal. That family means unconditional support. Let me translate that into accurate language. It means they expect unconditional access to your time, to your money, to your identity, even your credit profile, especially your credit profile if it's cleaner than theirs. Here is the part most people avoid. You can love your family and still lock your financial identity away from them. You can care about someone and still refuse to co-sign anything. You can answer a call and still say no. You can attend a dinner and still walk out when it becomes a negotiation against your own stability. And if you don't do those things, you are not being kind. You are being available for exploitation. Protect your credit, not casually, aggressively. Freeze it when you don't need it. Monitor it regularly. Use alerts. Use multi-factor authentication. Treat your identity like an asset because that's exactly what it is. And understand this clearly. Fraud doesn't become acceptable because it happens inside a family. It becomes harder to confront. That's the only difference. The law doesn't care about your last name. The bank doesn't care about your childhood. And eventually, reality doesn't care about your excuses. What you do before that moment, that's where your control is. Setting a boundary is not loud. It's not emotional. It's a decision. It's documentation. It's the refusal to sign something you didn't agree to, even when 50 people are watching you. I went back to work. Same job, same standards, different level of clarity. No one in my unit asked me to explain what happened. They didn't need to. My record was clean. That's all that mattered. Peace is not a feeling. It's the absence of exposure. No hidden liabilities. No unresolved threats. No conversations waiting to turn into obligations. That's the version I chose. They slapped me in front of 50 people expecting me to shrink to protect their secrets. They forgot that you can't force a soldier to surrender by hitting her. You only remind her exactly why she needs to win the war. Setting a boundary isn't a betrayal of your family. Sometimes it's the only way to save yourself. I didn't lose a family that night. I lost access to a system that depended on me staying small. There's a difference, and if you don't understand it, you'll keep trying to fix things that were never designed to work in your favor. What my family did wasn't just financial fraud. The money made it visible. The paperwork made it prosecutable. But the real damage was structural. They didn't just take $450,000 against a piece of land. They tried to take control of my identity. And I don't mean in the legal sense. That part is easy to prove. A forged signature, a mismatched IP address, a notarization tied to the wrong physical presence. That's a case. I mean control in this quiet sense. Who gets to use your name? Who gets to make decisions that affect your future? Who gets to assume you'll clean up the mess because that's what you've always done? That kind of control doesn't show up on a bank statement. It shows up in expectations. I grew up in a system where my role was defined early. Paige was the one who shined. She was praised for potential even when there was no follow-through. She was supported, protected, and constantly excused. I was the one who stabilized things. I followed rules. I met standards. I didn't create problems. And because of that, I became the safest place to redirect consequences. That's how it works. Not through one big moment. Through a series of small adjustments over time. Who gets blamed when something breaks? Who is asked to be the bigger person? Who is told to understand, forgive, and absorb? You don't notice it at first because it sounds reasonable. Just help your sister this once. Don't make a big deal out of it. You're stronger than this. That last one is the most dangerous. Because strength in that context doesn't mean resilience. It means tolerance. It means how much you can take without pushing back. And if you've been trained long enough to associate your value with how much you tolerate, you will eventually confuse exploitation with responsibility. That's where I was supposed to stay. The reliable one, the quiet one, the one whose name could be used because she wouldn't make noise about it. But here's the part they miscalculated. Discipline doesn't erase awareness, it sharpens it. Every time I chose not to react emotionally growing up, I wasn't becoming weaker. I was learning to observe. Every time I was told to let it go, I wasn't forgetting. I was documenting patterns. So when I saw my name on that loan, I didn't experience confusion. I experienced confirmation. It wasn't out of character for them. It was the logical endpoint of a system that had always treated my boundaries as optional. That's what people miss when they hear stories like mine. They think the fraud is the breaking point. It's not, it's the exposure. The system was already broken. The fraud just made it impossible to ignore. And once you see it clearly, you have two options. You either go back to playing your role and pretend nothing happened, or you remove yourself from the system entirely. There isn't a middle ground that lasts. I didn't confront them because I expected accountability. I confronted them to confirm the structure. The response told me everything I needed to know. No apology, no concern about what it could do to my career. No recognition of legal risk. Just deflection pressure and a demand that I fix it. That's not family behavior, that's operational behavior. They weren't relating to me as a person. They were interacting with me as a resource. Once you understand that the emotional confusion starts to disappear, you stop asking, why would they do this to me? And you start asking, why did I allow them access for this long? That question is harder because it puts responsibility back in your control. Not for what they did, but for what you do next. Taking control back doesn't look dramatic. There's no speech, no closure conversation where everyone finally understands your perspective and changes. That version exists in movies. In real life, taking control back looks like restriction, access control, information control, decision control. I didn't try to fix my family. I removed their ability to use me. That's the shift. People think strength is confrontation. It's not. Strength is enforcement. It's the ability to say no and maintain it when pressure increases. It's the ability to walk away without explaining yourself. 10 different ways hoping someone will finally agree with you. You don't need agreement. You need distance. And here's something that might make you uncomfortable. If someone only treats you well when you're useful to them, losing that usefulness will look like a problem to them. They will call you cold, selfish, difficult, ungrateful. Those labels are not evaluations. They are reactions to losing control. The moment I refused to sign that document, I wasn't just rejecting a loan. I was rejecting the role they had assigned me. That's why the reaction was so aggressive. Because it wasn't about money anymore. It was about power. And once power shifts, people show you exactly who they are. What I took back wasn't the farmland. It wasn't the credit file. It wasn't even my name on a legal document. I took back the right to decide what I participate in. That's it. Simple. Not easy, but simple. You don't have to destroy your life to keep someone else comfortable. You don't have to sign anything literally or emotionally that puts you at risk, just because the person asking shares your last name. And you don't owe loyalty to a system that only works when you stay silent. The moment you stop negotiating your worth is the moment people realize they can't afford you anymore. I didn't learn any of this from a self-help book. I learned it from a loan document with my forged signature on it, and a compliance timeline that didn't care about family dynamics. So I'm going to say this as clearly as possible. If you think what happened to me is rare, you're wrong. It's just usually quieter. Most identity theft cases don't involve strangers in dark rooms with laptops. They involve people who already know your full name, your date of birth, your social security number, and exactly how much pressure it takes to make you stay quiet. Family access is the biggest vulnerability most people never secure. Because we're taught not to. We're taught that trust equals safety. It doesn't. Trust is not a security system. It's an assumption. And assumptions are exactly what people exploit when they need something you didn't agree to give. Let's talk about what actually matters in real life, not in theory. First, your credit. If you are not actively using your credit for something specific, there is no reason for it to remain open and available. Freeze it, not later, not when something feels off, before anything happens. A credit freeze doesn't damage your score. It doesn't lock you out permanently. It simply prevents new accounts from being opened without your direct authorization. It turns your identity from an open door into a locked system. That alone stops most opportunistic fraud. Second, alerts. If your bank, your credit bureau, or any financial institution offers real-time alerts, turn them on. Every transaction, every inquiry, every change. If someone tries to use your identity, you should know within minutes, not months. Time is the difference between a problem and a disaster. In my case, I caught it during a routine check. That was training. Most people don't run background checks on themselves every 6 months. So you need systems that do it for you. Third, limit access. And this is where people get uncomfortable. You do not need to share sensitive financial information with anyone, unless there is a clear, necessary reason. Not your parents, not your siblings, not your partner. If they need your information for something legitimate, it should be documented, explained, and time-bound. Not casual, not assumed. Not we're family, so it's fine. That phrase has covered more bad decisions than any legal disclaimer I've ever seen. If someone reacts negatively when you set that boundary, that tells you more than their request ever could. Because people who respect you don't need unlimited access to you. They need clarity. Fourth, understand how liability actually works. The bank does not care about your intentions. The law does not care about your family history. If your name is on a document, you're responsible until proven otherwise. That's the default. You don't get to walk into a courtroom and say, "But it was my sister," and expect that to erase a signed guarantor line. You have to prove you didn't sign it. You have to prove fraud. You have to provide documentation. And that process takes time, resources, and legal support. So don't rely on explanations. Rely on prevention. Fifth, stop assuming they would never do that. That sentence has cost people their savings, their credit, their homes, and in some cases, their careers. Not because their family members were monsters, but because those family members made bad decisions under pressure and chose the easiest available option, which was someone else's identity. You don't need to hate someone to protect yourself from them. You just need to accept that proximity does not equal safety. And here's something most people won't tell you. Fraud inside a family rarely starts with a big plan. It starts small. A signature here, a cosign there, a temporary use of your information that turns into something larger when the first risk doesn't get caught. Each step makes the next one easier, because there are no consequences. Until there are. By the time you see the full picture, it's already structured. That's why prevention matters more than reaction. Now let's talk about mindset. Because tools without mindset don't hold. You are not being paranoid by protecting your identity. You are being responsible. You are not accusing anyone by setting boundaries. You are defining terms, and you are not obligated to justify those terms to people who benefit from you not having them. If someone says, "Don't you trust me when you set a boundary?" understand what they're actually asking. They're asking you to remove your safeguards for their convenience. That's not trust, that's exposure. And exposure is exactly what leads to situations like mine. Here's the reality most people avoid. You can love someone and still restrict their access to your life. Those two things are not in conflict. They only feel like they are if you've been taught that love means availability. It doesn't. It means choice. And if your choices are always aligned with someone else's needs at the expense of your own stability, that's not love. That's imbalance. What happened to me didn't require genius. It required access, opportunity, and the assumption that I wouldn't push back. Remove any one of those and the situation changes. That's what you control, not other people's behavior. Your exposure to it. So if you take anything from this, make it practical. Lock your credit, monitor your activity, limit your information. Understand your liability. And stop assuming that shared history guarantees safe behavior, because it doesn't. If your name is on the paper, your life is on the line. I didn't feel guilt right away. That surprised people when they eventually heard the story from a distance. They expected some version of regret a moment, where I questioned whether I went too far, whether there was a softer way to handle it. There wasn't. What I felt was quiet, not relief, not satisfaction, just the absence of pressure. And that's how I knew I had made the right decision, because guilt, real guilt, doesn't disappear when the situation gets easier. It stays. It follows you into quiet moments. It shows up when there's nothing left to distract you. What I experienced wasn't that. It was clarity. The guilt came later, but not in the way people think. It came through other people, through comments, through extended relatives who suddenly remembered I existed after years of ignoring me. You could have handled it privately. They're still your parents. Family should stay together no matter what. That last one is the most common and the most dangerous, because it sounds like a value, but it functions like a trap. Let me break it down. Family should stay together only works if everyone inside that family respects basic boundaries. It only works if there is mutual accountability. It only works if harm is acknowledged and corrected. If those conditions don't exist, staying together doesn't create unity. It creates access. Unrestricted, unchallenged access to you. That's not a family. That's an open system. And open systems get exploited. My mother's letter was a perfect example. She didn't say we were wrong. She didn't say we hurt you. She didn't say, we understand the consequences of what we did. She said things got out of hand. That's not accountability. That's minimization. She said Paige made mistakes. That's not accuracy. That's reframing. Then she asked for money. That's not reconciliation. That's continuation. The pattern didn't change. The tone did. And a lot of people fall for that, because they're not responding to the content. They're responding to the guilt. Guilt is one of the most effective control tools in any relationship. It doesn't require force. It doesn't require logic. It just requires you to believe that saying no makes you a bad person. Once that belief is in place, everything else becomes easy to manipulate. You start negotiating with yourself. Maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe I should just help this one time. That's how it restarts, not with a big decision, with a small exception. And small exceptions are how boundaries disappear. Here's the part most people don't say out loud. The people who benefit from your lack of boundaries will always call your boundaries a problem. They will label you cold, difficult, selfish, disconnected. Those labels are not descriptions. They are pressure, designed to push you back into your previous role, the role where you were easier to manage. When my father said I was dead to him, that wasn't an emotional reaction. It was a control statement, a final attempt to force compliance through fear of loss. The assumption was simple. Losing family would be so painful that I would choose to submit instead. That assumption only works if you believe that what you're losing is actually healthy. If the relationship is built on access pressure and conditional approval, you're not losing support. You're losing exposure, and exposure is what puts you at risk. People ask the same question every time. What if I lose my family? So let me answer that directly. If the price of keeping your family is your stability, your identity, your safety, or your future, then you don't have a family. You have a system that depends on your sacrifice. And systems like that don't improve when you give them more. They expand. They take more because they can. So the real question isn't, what if I lose them? It's, what do I keep if I don't? In my case, the answer was simple. I kept my name, my career, my financial record, my decision-making authority, my peace. That's a fair trade. Now let's talk about how you actually handle guilt when it shows up. Because it will. Even when you're right, even when you have evidence, even when the law is on your side. You've been trained to feel responsible for other people's reactions. That doesn't disappear overnight. So you need a process, not an emotional argument. A process. When guilt shows up, you don't debate it. You verify your actions. Ask 3 questions. Was it legal? Was it accurate? Did it protect me from harm? If the answer to all 3 is yes, you move on. You don't need approval. You don't need agreement. You don't need someone else to confirm that your boundary is valid. Boundaries are not group decisions. They are personal enforcement. And enforcement only works if it's consistent, not when it's convenient, not when it's comfortable, when it's necessary. The hardest part is not setting the boundary. It's maintaining it when someone tries to negotiate it down. Because they will, with emotion, with pressure, with history, with guilt. But none of those change the facts. And facts are the only thing that matter when the consequences are real. The night of the banquet wasn't the beginning, it was exposure. The slap didn't create the problem, it revealed it. In front of 50 people who had spent years believing the version of my family that was easiest to accept. And in that moment, I had a choice. Protect the image or protect myself. I chose correctly. They expected me to protect the family by staying silent. I protected myself by telling the truth. And if that truth destroys something, it was never worth protecting. If this story made you look at your own situation differently, even slightly subscribe. Because the most important lessons aren't about strangers. They're about the people you were told you never needed to question.